Welcome to The Explainer. You know, when you look at a piece of art, you probably think you know the difference between an original and a copy, right? It seems so simple. But what if I told you that for a long time, those words didn't mean what we think they mean? Today, we're diving into a wild story from the 16th century, a full-blown crisis, really, that completely changed how we think about art. Okay, so our story kicks off where a lot of fights about money and value do, in a courtroom. We're going all the way back to 1576. So put yourself in this situation. Imagine you're a big shot art dealer. You get your hands on a painting, it's signed by an absolute superstar artist of the day, but something feels off. You get this nagging suspicion that it's not the real deal. So what do? Well, if your name was Gabriel Drew, you'd sue somebody. That's exactly what he did. He had this painting, Cain killing Abel, and it was supposed to be by the legendary Antwerp artist Frans Floris. But he just wasn't buying it. He wanted stone-cold proof that the master's own hands had touched that canvas. And here's where it gets really weird. The signature itself seemed totally airtight. It literally said that Frans Floris both invented the idea for the painting and physically made it. I mean, what more could you want? So what on earth was Droot's problem? Well, his problem, and this is the key to the whole story, is that the rules we all just assume exist today, they didn't. Back in the 16th century, the way people even talked about originals and copies was from a completely different planet. Okay, so first up, you had something called the principal. Think of this as the master's one true version. It was the definitive work, kind of like the original source code that everything else was built from. And from that principal, you'd get what they called a nabild, which literally means afterimage. Now, this was not a fake, not at all. It was seen as a totally legit replica that carried all the authority of the original, kind of like an official reissue of a classic album or something. And you're gonna love this. The word they used was counterfeitin, which, yeah, is where we get our word counterfeit. But back then, it had zero negative vibes. None. It just meant to make a super faithful, really accurate replica. The goal was to be as true to the original as possible. So you have this whole system, right? It's got its own logic, it makes sense to people, and it was all about to be thrown into absolute chaos by one guy. An artist who decided to run his studio not like a quaint little workshop, but like a full-on modern factory. That artist was Frans Floris, and he was an absolute master of efficiency. We're talking a massive studio, sometimes with over 100 assistants working for him at once. His method was wild. He'd just draw these chalk outlines of his ideas directly onto the wood panels, and then he'd basically tell his students to assemble the painting, like it was a piece of IKEA furniture, using a library of pre-made parts. Yeah, he would paint dozens of these stock heads. You know, head of an old man, head of Christ, and they'd just be sitting around the studio. An assistant's job might be to paint a body and then literally just plug in one of the pre-made heads. It was a totally modular system for making art. Mix and match. And you can really see his whole philosophy at work in this one painting. Look at the elder masters. They're the thinkers, the geniuses. They're not holding paintbrushes, they're holding books. They're the ones with the big ideas. And then you have the younger artists, who are the skilled hands, the ones who actually do the physical work of painting. Idea versus execution. You can see how this would create a huge problem, right? A total crisis of authorship. If Floris just came up with the idea and a quick sketch, and some anonymous assistant painted every single brushstroke, is it still a Floris? That's the question that kept collectors like our guy Gabriele Drew up at night. So, here we are. You've got this immense pressure from the market, all this confusion about what makes a painting real, and right out of that chaos, a completely new idea of what a copy could be was about to emerge. And to understand how they solved this puzzle, we need to turn our attention to this absolutely magnificent painting by an artist named Michiel Coxey. What you're looking at is a replica of the legendary Ghent altarpiece. And get this, it was commissioned by one of the most powerful men in the world, King Philip II of Spain. Now, a poet named Lucas de Heer was writing about this massive project, and he started by using the old word we talked about, contrefeiten, to describe the process of making it. But then, when he described the finished painting itself, he used a totally new word borrowed from French that had never been used like this before in Dutch. He called it a copie. And this single word change signals a revolution in thinking. See, the old nabild was just a substitute. It was anonymous. Its job was just to continue a tradition. But a copy? That was something totally different. It was an interpretation. It was self-aware. It had a creator who was proud of their work, and it was openly in a conversation with the past. I mean, Coxey wasn't hiding anything. He wasn't trying to pass this off as the original. He proudly signed and dated it. He even changed stuff on purpose, adding portraits of his own modern-day patrons right into the scene. And the best part? He painted the whole thing in public, over 2 years, right there in the chapel next to the original. He turned the act of copying into a spectacular performance. Suddenly, the copy wasn't just a stand-in anymore. It became an act of art history itself. This engraving is amazing. It celebrates the original painter, Hubert van Eyck, but it explicitly praises Coxey for how his copy, is what's keeping that original genius alive for a whole new generation. Okay, so why does any of this matter? It's a 450-year-old story about some Dutch words. What does it have to do with you and me right now? Because everything hinges on that shift. That move from Nabil to copy isn't just about semantics. It's literally the moment our modern ideas of originality, of authorship, of the artist as a singular genius are born. Every single time we talk about whether a work of art is original, we are tapping right back into this 16th century debate. So let's break it down. The big takeaway here is this. The idea of a copy started out as just a simple substitute. But then, the pressures of the art market, thanks to guys like Franz Flores and his factory, created this huge identity crisis. And out of that fire, the copy was reborn as something new, a smart, conscious act of interpretation. So the next time you listen to a cover song or you watch a movie remake, I want you to think about this. Ask yourself that 16th century question. Is this just a simple replica, a Nabild, or is it a conscious copy, something that's creating a new conversation with the thing it's borrowing from? It's a question that's more relevant today than ever before.